Wikimedia is traditionally a core or an organization that really values its neutrality. But in terms of SOPA and also matters of open access, now they have stepped forward and really hissed the flag that they are supporting that.
No, I think that's great. I think that's good. And it's, again, it's one of those things that sort of is changing slowly, it's continuing to change, then all of a sudden, whoosh. For a lot of this stuff, I mean, certainly for primary research, I think it should just sweep through and do that.
Yeah, a lot of the things depends actually on the funders, including NIH. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to the discussion. The whole talk is meant to be interactive, so I have material to talk about more than 1 hour as a monologue, but I don't really want this to be a monologue. I prefer this to be a discussion, because I don't know how much exposure you have had to wiki thoughts and activities, and I'm a bit aware of NIH activities, but only certain aspects thereof, of course. And the talk is meant to be as a basis for future interaction, basically.
Shall we start?
Or
No, I would
wait a little while.
because right now it's 11. I would say
No, let's wait.
5 minutes.
Yeah, I would wait 5 minutes.
Sure. Sure.
But in the meantime, we can sort of do some introductions. So
should I just say a
introduce
few
yourself,
words?
and we can
Okay.
say a few things from the folks here. Why
Okay,
not?
so I'm a biophysicist by training. So I did my PhD on fossil MRI, single-cell MRI, MRI of frozen biological specimens. So kind of testing the boundaries or the limits of the method of MRI. Then I did a first postdoc in music perception, where I still used MRI, but then functional MRI and human brains. And then I did another postdoc on brain morphometry, still using MRI, but then
Brain what? Morphometry?
Morphometry, yeah. So still using MRI, but this time structures of brains. And I was actually interested in doing comparisons of brain structures of different primates. And there was a problem. Very few people have a magnet and a suitable primate brain, especially of living primates, at the same place. And so there are very few data sets, and most of these data sets are either focused on one species, or maybe two, or they are distributed across different scanners that are somewhere around this world. And so I really wanted to combine those things, but I had resistance. Basically, nobody was prepared to share those data, so I couldn't do this research, although I find it fascinating. So that's also an aspect I think maybe we could discuss. So that's the kind of research I do. The current project that I'm working on is vocal production in an elephant, because in Korea there is an elephant said to be able to pronounce some Korean words. So when I went there, took some recordings for 1 week, and we have now limited this down to something like 4 sounds that he can produce that Koreans reliably identify as Korean words, and that happen to be those words that he keeps hearing from his keepers. So there is some evidence of vocal learning from the elephants, but it hasn't passed the peer review yet, so it's under consideration right now, so you'll see whether that how that pans out. And certainly I would
How does he
love
do with German?
never tried. Yeah, we were actually thinking of trying to teach him something new. But given that it took him on the order of 10 years to learn 4 words, it's not something that anybody would be willing to fund.
But he hasn't forgotten anything.
That's right. It's an elephant.
Yeah, well, it really depends a bit on how you define what actually a word is that he recognized. And we did it such that we gave a series of recordings, 50 recordings, to native speakers of Korean who were tasked to write down what they hear in Korean alphabet. And if more than 4 out of 16 wrote this down in the same writing, so no spelling difference, then this was counted as a recognized word. So it always depends on the definition. Anyway, so this is the kind of research that I'm doing, and most of the, as you've noticed from the topics, the topics shifted, although I had a methodological focus on MRI. Most of my collaborators have always been from different disciplines and also placed in different areas of the globe. And so I already 10 years ago, I did most of my note-taking actually on the web, because it was easier to collaborate with people in Korea, for instance, or here in the States, and doing collaborative editing on documents with people in different time zones can really be nasty, especially if you send them around as email attachments. So whenever there were the services like Google Docs and Etherpads and so appearing, I was testing them out, and I'm still a heavy user. Wikis are part of that. Although what actually brought me to Wikipedia is not the scientific content, it was the linguistic component. Initially, when Wikipedia came around, it didn't have a lot of scientific content, and it also popped up in my search results very rarely, but sometimes it did, especially for the stuff that was not related to science. Like if I would go to a place like Washington, I would look it up on Wikipedia, and at that time you would have had it in 10 languages or so, not 100 like today. And I was just, when I was procrastinating, I like to read things like Wikipedia articles in different languages. And that got me interested in Wikipedia. After a while I noticed, oh, there is some science cropping up. And maybe let's see how I can contribute to that, or what the quality is, or what the problems are. And since that time I'm continuously engaged with that, and I hope that we can now go a little deeper.
I think we should, it's a good entree, we should start.
Okay. So as an opener, I chose 3 images here. I guess the one in the middle is familiar to all of you. The one here on the left was actually chosen as the open access file of the day yesterday. It represents the phylogenetic tree, and the open access file of the day is one file that we choose on Wikimedia Commons, which is the media repository for Wikipedia, every day, and there are basically 2 conditions. It must be from an open access source, and it must be used at least twice on Wikimedia projects. So say in 2 different Wikipedia articles of the same language, or in 2 articles in different languages, things like that. And what you see here on the right is actually the different projects that run under the label of Wikimedia, and they're often mixed up with Wikipedia. Most people think Wikipedia and Wikimedia is more or less the same, or Wikimedia might be a spelling error. No. Wikimedia Foundation is the society that runs all the servers, basically, and has a bit of stuff on the order of 120 staff, mostly in San Francisco. And different projects are, I'll name them all here. Wikipedia, then Wikimedia Commons, which is the media repository for all these projects. Wikisource, Wikinews, Wiktionary, Wikiversity, the incubator in which we kind of play around with new ideas. MediaWiki, which is the software on which all this is based, and then Wikispecies, Wikiquote, then the MetaWiki, in which the participants of the different projects exchange ideas and talk about strategy. Wikibooks, and then Wikimania, which is the conference that we're having right now in Washington, which is the main reason why I'm here. And to the logistics of this talk, it is actually meant to be followed on the wiki. When I prepared the talk, I didn't know that we would be in such a small room and nobody would have a laptop. I expected that at NCBI everybody would sit here with their laptop. Okay, so this is a slightly different experience than I had intended, but still I think we can all watch that screen and you can follow that way. But I actually like the sometimes it's a bit difficult to follow someone who shows something with the mouse. That's why I actually prefer people to follow the talk at their own pace by clicking around. And then when I see the stats later on, because for each and every page on Wikipedia you can see how many people have visited it. And then I know how the people enjoyed the talk. And so for one talk I started out with 160 people following the initial page. The lowest one later on was 16, so I lost 90%. But then it bumped up again when I went to the summary, so roughly 50 came back. So that's an interesting dynamic, and today I can't follow this because you don't follow. Anyway, in principle there is also the possibility to comment on my talk, has a talk page, as any other page on Wikipedia has a talk page. So if you have comments even later on, you can just post it there. And in order to warm up, just 2 questions. Who has ever edited any Wikipedia article here in the room? Okay, so 10%, roughly 15, let's say. And I'll just show you how it is. Here, you just type. You click on the edit button and you type. Who has not used any Wikipedia this week? Okay, so it's on the order of 1%. Yeah, then that's it.
It's only Wednesday.
I just edited an Wikipedia article. Then the outline here is the rough topics that I want to talk about, and there are some sub slides you can understand it as such. And none of this is meant to be a monologue. I really want you to chime in whenever you feel whenever you feel like commenting. And here is just an overview. I could talk about this table for an hour. It would probably be interesting to 1 or 2 of you. But the main idea here is that scholarly uses of wikis are not new, and there are even a number of similarities between wikis like Wikipedia and journals like PLOS ONE. And here I've gone through a number of criteria, like the scope of the site. In Wikipedia, it's all human knowledge. And for PLOS, it's starting out with biomedicine, but potentially it's all scholarly knowledge. So you won't have TV series covered in PLOS ONE, but basically anything that people do research about can come into PLOS ONE. And then you have a number of platforms in between that have that share some of those features and others not. So things like original research is strictly prohibited on Wikipedia right now, although some other Wikimedia projects allow it. So on Wikispecies, on Wikisource, you're allowed to post some sort of original research. And original research, in the sense that it is used on Wikipedia, means that you can't find any published resource about it. So basically you've calculated it on your own, or you've thought about it on your own, and you can't cite anyone else on that. Licensing is also different. Interestingly, Wikipedia and most of those wikis are less progressive in terms of licensing than the open access journals. Basically for historic reasons. When Wikipedia started out, Creative Commons was not founded yet, and so they had to choose some license, and they took the one that came closest to what they needed, which was the GFDL. GNU Free Documentation License. Most of you programmers probably know that. But this is a license that was meant to be used for code. It was not really meant to be used for text and images. So when Creative Commons came around, Wikipedia was watching attentively, and in 2009 they switched the GFDL license to the CC BY SA, which is the closest equivalent in Creative Commons terms. It's not exactly, but they made it such that the switch was legally possible. And this also means that the copyleft requirement, the share alike requirement, is in there for historic reasons. But most new open access journals, and certainly those that are compliant with the Budapest Open Access Declaration, they have now CC BY. And then there are a number of such parameters according to which you can compare the different sites. I'll just mention the sites in between. Citizendium is something like a Wikipedia where you have real names and some special role for people who have expertise in a certain area. So this normally sounds appealing to experts, but the problem is nobody participated in that site. And so it really didn't take off. Although every expert would say, yeah, that's a cool way to improve on Wikipedia, it doesn't work in practice. Scholarpedia is even more elitist. You're not allowed to start an article unless you're invited. Typically, even this is restricted to people who have either got the Nobel Prize or have something named after them. Like if a meteorite or a gene or something is named after you, then you have the right to kind of get invited to write an article, which is really elite. But the thing is, the articles that come out of this are really good, normally. Problem, and then once they are there, any registered member of the site can go there and edit it. Although the edits have to go through some approval by a curator, which is mostly those people who have originally written the article and some helpers of the site. But the licensing there is not free, certainly not compatible with Wikipedia. Mostly they use some non-commercial and even non-derivative. So if you use that text, you have to use it in its entirety, and you're not allowed to do anything to it. So it's not really in the spirit of a wiki. Although everything is implemented on a wiki, including the peer review. And they have two different options of peer review. One is the classical one, where you kind of put your review on a separate page, and then it's a different document than the original document. The other one is just edit the page as it is until you see it fit, which I think is a much more productive way of doing peer review than the way we do it now with journals. Then there is Encyclopedia of Earth, which is focused on the earth sciences, and then there's which is still a wiki, and they have also some sort of approval. And the draft articles, they're not shown to the public; they're only shown to people who are logged in, which also limits the kind of content that they can offer. But they collaborate with numerous earth science societies around the globe, and so they also have quite good content on offer. And then we have journals like Atmospheric Chemistry and Physics, where the peer review takes place in public. So whenever you submit a manuscript there, the manuscript goes online for everyone to see. All the reviews are online for everyone to see. The reviewers can choose whether their name is public or not. And then the authors have to reply to the reviews in public. And then there is an editorial decision of accepting that manuscript or not, maybe after another round of revision. And then the final article is also public.
How many articles does that journal get per month, roughly? Do they publish a month, you know?
On the order of 30 or so are being published. We can check it if you want.
No, just curious.
But they have been around for more than 10 years. They started in 2001, actually the same time that Wikipedia started. And they're, in terms of the impact factor, they are leading the field of earth science for 5-6 years now or so. They have a rejection rate of on the order of 20%, so which kind of defies traditional perceptions of quality. But this is probably for two reasons. One, if your initial manuscript is public for everyone to see, you have a higher motivation to really put up good content there. Most people nowadays, they submit their manuscript no matter what stage it is in, and they kind of allow for certain improvement during the peer review, and take this to include things like spelling and overall organization, things that should normally be already good when you submit, but as you know, this is not always the case. And here it is exposed to everyone in the community if you deliver such manuscripts. So that's something that you don't want.
What happens to the papers that are rejected? Did it drop from the site, or
No, the manuscript remains there, but they don't make it to the second stage.
Can they be published elsewhere still?
Yeah. There was some inquiry with journals
Most
like
journals
Nature.
wouldn't accept that.
Yeah, well, but even Nature does it. They treat it as a preprint. Because it is not peer reviewed, it is essentially a preprint in most
So
definitions.
the other journals will consider it.
Yeah. And because it is actually it's just a preprint. It is the same as what you would find on Archive or in Nature Proceedings.
Why would Nature publish something basically rejected?
I think it happened once or twice, so it does happen, but I don't know the details because it's not really my field, so I didn't follow that.
Who's running this?
The European Geological Society or Geophysical Union, EGU. And the second reason why this happens is that they have an open access fee, and they don't charge it at the point of publication, but at the point of submission of the draft manuscript, which is also something that keeps people away from submitting something that they're not sure about. So these two combined, I think, are something at least worth considering for other journals.
How large is the fee?
Depends. It's on the order of something like $20 per page of the draft manuscript, and it is formatted a bit strangely, such that it amounts to roughly 2 pages for a normal A4 page. So 60 per page, roughly.
I have a question. You're listing this under scholarly wiki. So, in what way is a wiki? Does it allow for continuous updates after publication?
I mentioned these here because they have this two-stage peer review process, whereas in a wiki you have potentially an n-stage peer review process. You can have.
Okay. But once it passes those two stages, it's frozen.
Here they still publish static documents. They basically published two versions of that paper. It's one, the initial manuscript, and then the final published manuscript. Basically the same as every other journal does, just that they have the review part open, which I think really like, and the community has really well accepted it. Okay, so this is the kind of scholarly wikis that exist. There are numerous others that are more specialized, but I've just chosen the more general ones because they are closest to Wikipedia in terms of structure and features. Then, again, Wikimedia already mentioned it is a whole set of platforms that can be used in different way, and they're kind of structured by channel. So we have Wiki News for news, we have Wiki Quote for quotes, we have Wiktionary for dictionaries, and so on. And Wikipedia is the encyclopedia part. And so the perception of what an encyclopedia is has been dramatically changed by the existence of Wikipedia, but still people working on Wikipedia have an idea of what this encyclopedia should look like, and this determines whether a certain subject will eventually get an article or not. There are very many discussions about notability of certain subjects, including scientists, for instance. And one of the problems is much information about scientists is not available from the normal sources that Wikipedian editors consult. Like, the popular press will very rarely report about the biography of a scientist. They might occasionally report about some science, but then there is the science part is this, and then there is one or two lines. It's this and Dr. this and that from University of so and so. That's it. We don't know anything about that person behind that, and that's a real problem in actually writing articles about. Any of you, I don't know how many of you have checked whether you have an article. I checked that you have one. It's very short, probably much shorter than
Is it the one you edited?
probably much shorter than the CV you send around when you have to send around CVs, and it doesn't have an image.
Not that much shorter.
Anyway, there are certain kinds of problems that are related to how this concept of encyclopedia is being interpreted. Then it's a multilingual environment and multicultural environment. We really have Wikipedias in almost 300 languages, 283 or so at the moment. The smallest ones have on the order of just 5 articles or so, and the largest one, the English Wikipedia, is about to reach 4 million within July, and we have everything in between. So, and it's also a cross-culture thing. So even though you have multiple, on the English Wikipedia, for instance, basically everyone is participating because it's one of the global languages. But even within the English Wikipedia, you have people who prefer to write in US English or in British English or in Australian English. And then you have sometimes different perspectives on the same thing, like...
With the existence of Australian English.
Yeah, something like that.
It's not very English.
Anyway, those people participate. And then you have even Germans or Japanese or so participating also on the English Wikipedia. Most of my edits are actually on the English one. So it's a mess in terms of culture.
What's the second biggest, and how many entries are in there? Do you know?
That's German, and it's 1.5 million.
Really?
And then right after that comes French with 1.3, and I think there's, well, we can actually check. If I know how to switch from full, okay, here. So that's what I mean by doing this interactively. I actually like doing this.
That's an interesting cultural
So
because in terms of use of language, Spanish is probably much more prevalent.
Right.
Chinese
yeah,
and Korean.
but it's a combination of many different things. It's a combination of popularity of the language. It's a combination of availability of the internet.
Right.
It's another factor is availability of competing resources, and also
Availability of
social-
Wikipedia. China, I think, blocks the Chinese Wikipedia, or has off and on.
Yeah, it's off and on. Yeah, or the Uzbek Wikipedia was blocked for more than a year. So people who wanted to edit Uzbek Wikipedia from Uzbekistan couldn't do that.
I had a hell of a time.
They have worse problems than that. They even have massacres organized by the government. Not having access to Wikipedia is not really on the top of their mind. But from the Wikipedia perspective, it is still a problem. And here you have English basically 4 million, German 1.4, French 1.2, Spanish 900,000, Russian 800, Italian 900, Portuguese 700, Chinese 400. And then it goes down. You have a whole bunch of more than 100,000, including Kazakh, for instance, and so on.
So, in your view, what's the motivation to edit the articles in some other language besides English? What I mean is, you can get automatic translation of English
For some languages.
For some languages, but obviously, as you get a smaller and smaller group, you're going to have less and less articles. So, in the non-English language, do people tend to write more about, say, German literature, or something that would be maybe less likely to be written about in English? Or
That's actually
are they covering the same material but just less of it?
It's all of that. And so, for instance, I noticed in taxonomy that there are vast gaps in all of the Wikipedias, but it is quite normal to have taxonomic articles covered on the Dutch, Vietnamese, German Wikipedias, and not on the English one. So some obscure butterfly or plant or so. It's something that is apparently not of interest to English writers, even though the literature about it, the scientific literature, is in English. But the people who write about it on Wikipedia prefer to write in their native languages, which happen to be those that I just mentioned. Also Polish and French, they have large sections of taxonomy for which the English Wikipedia doesn't have an entry.
What about if there is article like in English, but there is no like Russian version or German version, or for example article in Russian, there is no English version. Do it like cross-translate?
Sometimes, yes.
Well, it's done professionally automatically because the tools which automatically translate, like Google Translate, they produce some kind of junk. So it's, if you know both languages, you won't read it automatic translation.
Actually, it's rather the other way around. Google Translate uses Wikipedia in order to train their algorithms. And so, for instance, the Kazakh and the Kyrgyz languages, they don't have Google Translate yet. And Google is actively collaborating with the Wikipedia communities in those languages in order to get a large enough corpus such that their algorithms reach a certain quality threshold. But it doesn't work the other way around. Although between very similar languages like Turkish to Azerbaijani, it works pretty well. I've seen several cases where native speakers of both languages were present and native speakers of both languages that knew the other language well enough were present, and then Google was demonstrating the toolkit, and there were very few things that had to be changed. So if the languages are very similar, it works fine, but if you try to translate something from English to, say, Turkish, it's useless. And so most of the translations, if they happen by hand. Most of the time, actually, not by professional translators, but by people who happen to know a bit of both languages. And then if they are really comfortable in both languages, they might translate the whole article. If they're not so comfortable in the target language, then they might just take the gist of a larger chunk of the article, and then someone else jumps in, and after a while you have a large article in that second language as well. Motivation is fun. Wikipedia is basically a fun project, which explains that there is so much about pop culture in it. Most people don't do science for fun. There are a few that call themselves scientists, but they normally don't edit Wikipedia. And we've also done some surveys of those scientists who actually do edit Wikipedia, and about half of them edit in the scientific parts of Wikipedia, but half of them say no. I do science all the day, so I will edit about jazz or whatever in my spare time. So yes, I am on Wikipedia, I'm familiar with it, but don't come to me with biotechnology about it. So there's the main driver is actually fun. Some also use it in more elaborate ways, it's more easy for them to remember things if they actually put it into a Wikipedia article, because Wikipedia has a logical structure of how things are being named and how you find things and how things are being linked. And so whenever you then remember, oh, I heard something about that, it was something like happening at a NCBI. It had something to do with NCBI and Africa and something like this. Then you just search for NCBI in Africa in Wikipedia, and then you got it normally. And then once you're very close, you will probably remember anyway. So that's how some people use it. But the main thing is really fun.
So how do you control the quality in language outside English?
It's up to people who actually speak those languages. So the administration is separate by language. So for most of the language, for the very small wikis where you have just 1, 2, or 10 users or so, maybe there are some people who administer the wiki but don't speak the language. But for most wikis, you have administration by the local language community, who certainly doesn't have a problem using this language to communicate because it's their language. There are some borderline cases, like certain German dialects have their own Wikipedia, and then it's really a matter of definition whether you really speak that language or not. But basically, it's not a problem. It's people who speak that language who have to contribute a large amount in order to be elected by the community to be an administrator.
Daniel, do you know if the gender thing of it, but mostly being guys, is the same across all the different languages?
I think there are differences between languages. The most concrete figures that we have is for English. That's on the order of 9 to 12%, depending a bit on the year or kind of survey that you look at.
Wait. Say that again?
9 to 12% of the editors on the English Wikipedia are females.
Yeah. And so then you notice it too. So for example, in the medical stubs, postpartum hemorrhage, I was looking at some of them, which is like one of the biggest killers of women in the world, like thousands every day, and there's no real article. It's still just a stub. So you really notice, when you were saying about like what do people then think is fun? Well, then obviously they're going to be interested in the things that matter to them. So something like postpartum hemorrhage doesn't have a proper Wikipedia page.
And what are the notions as to why it's dominated by men? Is it?
Oh, that's actually the subject of several sessions on Wikimedia.
Yes.
Bottom line is nobody really knows. Second aspect is Wikipedia grew out of an open source culture where you have a certain dominance of males, and also it's an online thing, but it doesn't have so many social features. Like there are certain online tools like Twitter or so, where women now are in the majority.
Interesting.
That's great.
Yeah. So you could try to recruit people on Twitter, but then converting them into wiki editors is not so easy. But there are several people working on the Wikimedia Foundation on really improving the gender gap, and it's one of the strategic goals for the next 5 years. It's not easy. Yeah.
I wanted to ask more about the motivation factor for scientists contributing, and you might be getting to this because I see you have a slide on altmetrics, but...
Yeah, I don't have a slide particularly on that, but the main thing there is, as a scientist, you always have to submit your papers and especially your research proposals to someone. You don't know who, but you can suspect that they're not always as much an expert in all of that as you are. So some of them will just Google up some of the things that you wrote in your proposal, and if Wikipedia says it's bullshit, then the proposal is rejected. That's a very easy story, but there's certainly some truth to it. So many people who contribute to their area, they really want to represent the area such that it really makes sense, and such that it doesn't stand in the way of this area being funded.
But are there efforts to try to give scientists credit in some way for their Wikipedia contributions?
Okay, yeah, well, there are a number of efforts. The most concrete one is actually here, this one, where we do basically let people write a review article about a certain subject that they choose that is not covered on Wikipedia well yet. So it's a stub or non-existent. And that article is being written according to the guidelines of the journal PLOS Computational Biology and of the English Wikipedia. And so once the article is published in the journal, it also goes live on the English Wikipedia and can then be edited, updated by whoever wants.
And how much take-up on that has there been?
Well, it was announced basically around Christmas, and the first article has been published in March, and now we have on the order of 5 actively in review and 20 being written. Without really going out and doing PR for this, because we're also not too sure of how it works out, and so we're just adopting a wait-and-see approach. And so we were waiting, and we are receiving suggestions for new articles on a weekly basis.
So
One or
does
two.
it also get updated in the journal? Is it
No.
synced with the journal?
In the journal, you have the comment functionality like on any other PLOS thing. So whenever there is something dramatic or something that is stated in that article turns out to be wrong, then you can just annotate it. But in principle, it's a static document like any other scholarly publication. And this, which actually makes up part of the motivation for people to contribute to this kind of scheme, because they know in many areas a review article is quickly outdated, but here in such a scheme there is a possibility to have it updated on a continuous basis, and the writers of these founding articles, they will always be credited. Yeah.
Do you have conditions, for example, if I refer to some Wikipedia articles 1 year ago, but then it was changed, now it says the one fact was before, now it's different from what was changed.
I'm not entirely sure whether I got the question, but there's on each Wikipedia page you have a tool called permanent link. Here, and this brings you to that permanent link, and if you save this and cite it in your paper, you will always be brought to this version of that page. That's true for all pages on all Wikipedias, on all Wikisource, in all languages. And the problem is that most people just cite the article, let's say proteins. They don't cite the article proteins and old ID equals that number. And then they run into the problem that you really have to go through the version history if you really want to find out when the scholarly article citing that thing was submitted, to have a rough idea what Wikipedia version they might have seen. So if you ever cite Wikipedia articles, I really recommend using that permanent link. If you really want to make a point that something was contained in that Wikipedia article, if you just want to link to that for background information, it probably doesn't matter that much.
So there's a potential that the author may disagree with some of the material that's been edited in under his
Yeah.
name, right? In that.
Yeah, but his name, well, I can show you how this looks like. So here you have the journal article. I can click on it, and it looks like a normal PLOS journal article. Once it loads. By the way, they have here banner ads. Join Wiki Project Open Access. I like those because I made them. And it leads you to Wiki Project Open Access, which is concerned with handling open access matters and so on. So if you have an interest, I know someone who would like to talk about that. Okay, so I close that window. So here is the file. Oh yeah. This is a copy of the PDF just to show that this is a static document. Of course, you can go to the journal site, and then you can get the HTML or whatever PDF, XML version, and you can get the figures in TIFF format, which is not editable, whereas in the Wikipedia article you have the SVG version. So I'll show you the Wikipedia article. That's another point. Publishers, so far, no scholarly publisher accepts SVG as an editable graphics format. They all want some non-editable for basically reasons of tradition, which actually makes it really hard to reuse such stuff on Wikipedia, because very often you have here not A, B, C, but you might have something written in English, and you want to use that same graphic in Japanese or so, and then the English is useless. And so there are loads of such images that have been reverse engineered by Wikipedians in an editable format, such that people can use it in Wikipedia projects more easily. Okay, so but the content is the same between the two, and then the main difference is here you have at the bottom there is one note here. This incorporates text from, and then it cites that article at a prominent place. And then in the version history, there's also normally a note when this was pasted in. Full rewrite here. And then there's a link to the DOI of the journal thing. So from that point on, there have been changes. So on the order of 30 or so changes. And you can even see...
What kind of substantive changes as opposed to just,
let's just see the sum of all changes since then. So it's a bit of rephrasing. Then some paragraphs have been shifted around. Oh no, this was the wrong version. Basically, no substantive. No. Where was it? I failed to see it now.
Keep going up.
I just had it.
Yeah, there it is.
Here we go. Okay, so this is the new version. And here we have all this. Okay, yeah. So a bit of rewriting, relinking, renaming of references for some reason. That's the thing that happened. And yeah, a stylistic here is permutation by duplication from capital D to small d. So nothing substantial yet at first glance. But this is just a few months after the review came out. So in the review you wouldn't expect dramatic changes too much there. And they have added a number of tags, like here, expand section on other processes that can lead to circular permutations. That's also something that was actually pointed out during the review process. And yeah, here the section has then been tagged. Then, and at the end of the page, you have certain categories that have been changed, and that's it, basically. But the main point is here that you can see what has happened since, and if you just imagine the whole procedure for something like molecular biology or the solar system or so, you would see what Ptolemaios has done, what Kepler and Newton has done to the same document. You wouldn't have to run around to different journals or books in different libraries or something like this. You could see this in the same document. You could even do some summary changes, like I just demonstrated. You could go to the time before Galileo came around, and then to the time after Kepler published his findings, and you could see all the changes that happened during that period. So once science gets used to using such tools with public version history, it doesn't have to be a wiki, it could be GitHub or anything else, but communication tools with a public version history, this will make it much easier for science historians later on to really study their subject.
So don't you find people like to rewrite, create a whole new thing rather than have to reread and rewrite what they've done before? That's been my experience as a website editor at a previous job. Was they didn't want to rewrite, look over what they'd already written, rather just start fresh.
I think a large chunk of the motivation for doing this is that nowadays you're not rewarded for improving on what you've written, but you're rewarded for having a new publication. And even if it's just basically a remix of what you've already written, it counts as a new publication. Once we have more of the things that are just presented here, I guess this attitude is bound to change to some extent. But still there are people who really prefer to write some things from scratch from time to time, and they can do so here. There's nothing stopping them. If they find the lead of this article to be somehow wanting, they can improve it. They can rewrite it as often as they want, actually. So there's no problem with that. Okay, trying to get back to the structure of my talk. So Scholarly Wikis was finished. Wikimedia, we have a number of things I would like to talk about here. But we are already 45 minutes in, so it's clear that I won't manage to show you. All this was clear from beforehand, so I'll just start giving you brief descriptions of the headings of my slides, and then you can just basically tell me which slides are of interest to you. GeneWiki is an attempt to kind of link curation of information on Wikipedia with curation of databases, specifically gene and protein databases. Open access media
How
importer.
much activity has been on that? Whenever I periodically, kind of go back and look at it, it's not obvious to me what's really happening with that.
Well, it's hard to quantify, and I'm not following this closely, but I have the impression that they're adding new articles on a roughly daily basis. And existing articles, they have on the order of 1,000 or so articles covering different proteins, maybe even 10,000. I'm not entirely sure about the number.
Well, many of them were just scooped up from other...
They were scooped up basically from PubMed abstracts and some molecular structure databases, protein database, and that is the standard set. But then people come around if the article, for instance, is about a certain protein, and that protein is being mentioned in relation to a certain wiki article on a disease. Then that mentioning of that disease will go onto the page of that protein. And so it's small changes, but it happens on a regular basis. So open access media importer. There is a lot of supplementary materials in scholarly articles. Some of them are multimedia.
I have a question about the GeneWiki also, because there's quite a bit of sort of factual aggregation and change that's going on around genes, particularly human genes. And I was aware at the time when this was started of a lot of things being scooped up, for example, off our website to get it launched. But I'm not aware that there's any attempt to keep that up to date as going forward. So my question really is whether there's any thought given to some sort of hybrid situation where you continue to update parts from the sort of resources that we do, but allow sort of editing of the text and that sort of stuff separately.
I think that's part of their project. And if you look at, I just opened the version history of one of those articles on insulin, and it is being edited on a weekly basis at least. So it has been edited in July, well today actually, and then in June on the order of 10 times.
But like what kind of changes? I mean, I remember, I don't want to sound critical, but I've looked at things where sometimes stuff is being changed in some kind of programmatic way.
Well, let's just take a look at all the changes since end of May. So a new citation, a new reference, a new link. That's it, basically. That's what you would expect. That's the small kind of changes that accrue over time, and until a point when a real rewrite becomes necessary, because then it's just an enumeration of new references. So like proteins also involved in disease A and in disease B and so on. After a while, this becomes illegible, so people start rewriting it. But there is certainly the idea that this project is going to continue. That was the idea of linking it with Wikipedia, and as far as I can see, it does. It's at different speeds, basically determined by the popularity of those proteins.
Right.
So insulin certainly is more popular than secret frizzled related proteins, for instance. But we can take a look at that one as well and see what happened there over the last few January, October. So it's larger intervals, but still something happens.
The knowledge isn't changing as fast.
That's another thing. If a protein is popular, then it will get a lot of research funding also, which is another link that I mentioned before. And most non-scientists probably never heard of that non-frizzled one.
Is GeneWiki still funded by? It was funded by like NIH or something.
I think it was funded by NIH, and I think they still have a grant that is running for this year or next year or something like this. They had several consecutive grants. but I'm not entirely up to date. I'm not involved with the project. I just observe it. Okay, so the media importer. There are loads of supplementary materials, including some video and audio stuff, and most of them are presented in the journals just by name, by file name. So there's no preview, like on YouTube. Whenever you go to any video, you at least get one screenshot as a preview, and no scholarly journal has that for the video content. And also there is no real standard in terms of the file types that are being accepted. So I actually have some stats on the file types in supplementary materials. In the supplements, that's in another talk. I'm giving a talk on that on Saturday. That talk is not entirely finished, but the studs image is already there. So here. So this is the number of occurrences in the open subset of PubMed Central. Amongst those, papers that are under the CC BY license. So you have on the order of 10,000 TIFFs, even more plain text, Excel, MS Word, and PDF. Yeah, and then on the order of a few thousand JPEGs and PNGs, and hundreds of GIFs, some BMPs, so, and video, QuickTime is on the order of thousands, and so on. So, just raw numbers. And
it's not just supplemental materials, it's videos, not only have text.
yeah, but sometimes it is video and audio material, and the focus of this importer is actually audio and video material, because Wikipedia doesn't have a lot of it.
Yeah, because chiefs are coming from scanned open access articles.
Sometimes.
Yeah, but these are probably those TIFFs that have been described as supplementary materials to the article.
Yes.
Yeah. Here, all the supplementary materials, they have to be mentioned somewhere in the article. So, but here we are specifically interested in audio and video material because, Wikipedia articles lack audio and video materials. So, for instance, a species description. There is a taxo box. Let's just take any like. Something like this. You have that's called a taxo box, where you have the classification. You always have an image. You sometimes have a distribution map. You never have a sound, basically, for several reasons. The large sound databases that exist in the world, they're not really happy to share the stuff that they have. And the second reason is, even though many sound samples are being published as supplementary materials when a new species is being described or when some new recordings become available, they're normally hidden in the supplementary materials, or they're published in non-open access journals. So we really focus on that subset that is available from under CC BY license and published in the supplement, and the tool imports them automatically into Wikimedia Commons and suggests categories so that the things can be incorporated into Wikipedia articles. Then there is a thing, side journal, like at Europeana, for instance, and certain at another wiki that is similar to Wikispecies, and at one publisher, Pensoft, you have the opportunity to click on anything here, like cite on Wikipedia, and then you get the code, which you can introduce into the Wikipedia article in order to cite that particular item from that particular source. Here you have it in 3 different formats: big tag, EndNote, and Wikipedia. And here the thing is interesting. This is a wiki already, so they have a version content, and the problem is most of the traditional citation formats like BibTeX and EndNote, they don't take care of versioned stuff. So what we've done here is actually add the versioned thing, including that number. So here this is 22,026. That's the unique identifier for that version, and you can cite it just, it's just a note in the BibTeX, for instance. And the same goes for the file available from the publisher. So some already do that. If NIH would do that for the stuff that you have, that would be really great. It would facilitate a lot of citations from Wikipedia.
We'll discuss that.
We've already
The
started.
open access.
What's that?
We already started discussing it.
Yeah.
The open access file that I already mentioned. Then there are wiki projects. Wikipedia works. That goes back to your question about quality control. So there are different layers of quality control actually. One is the many eyes principle. Given many eyes, all bugs are shallow, someone famously said. This doesn't necessarily apply to Wikipedia because it only works if you have a certain knowledge of the subject. And this is not a given at Wikipedia. So many articles are written by people who explicitly have no knowledge about the subject. They just trust some sources that they found about the subject. But there are also some more systematic approaches to a certain topic, like Wiki Project Computational Biology. First step is identifying the scope, which is sometimes difficult because the boundaries of computational biology are not, and of basically any subject are not easy to define. But then once the scope is roughly defined, people go around, check what articles are already there, and then tag them basically, and then this is automatically computed as a matrix of articles that exist. You have an importance measure and a quality measure here, and then people can choose whatever angle they want to work on. There are some people who always want to lift an article from quality level B to featured article. There are certain differences, they're all linked from here. Or there are some others who prefer to actually work on stubs, because that's easier and you can more easily manage higher numbers. Everybody does as they prefer actually. Then there's also tutorials in terms of how to edit Wikipedia or so. They're given, for instance, at ECCB. And yeah, then this was the Wikimedia part. Chris asked me to include a bit of things about open data. So first you have the Wikipedia articles to open data and linked data. Then there is a a MediaWiki extension called Semantic MediaWiki, which tries to really annotate data within a wiki environment. Then there is DBpedia, which most of you probably know. It's that large blob here in the middle, the largest component of the Open Data Cloud. If you go by the number of datasets deposited in CK, and
I actually don't know anything about that. No, we don't know about that.
Okay, DBpedia. DBpedia basically takes Wikipedia as it is and tries to put it into a structured format automatically.
To extract data from info boxes? Is that
Yeah, mostly from info boxes. There's kinds of that I've just shown you for the chimpanzee. This exists for towns or politicians or basically anything, and they just rely on infobox nomenclature being roughly standardized, and then they extract information on that basis. This doesn't work too well because articles are written independently of each other mostly, and so some people might even use a different type of infobox even though they're both describing, let's say, a politician. Someone might not know that there is an infobox politician. They just take the more general one on persons or something like that, or American or whatever. So it's not all consistent, but they've taken what they had, Wikipedia as it is.
When Google's making knowledge graphs out of Wikipedia things, are they getting them from there?
Yeah, I think so. There's now a new project called Wikidata, for which there is a logo contest, and if you have an account on Wikipedia that is older than this month, you can actually still vote until tomorrow on the logo. And the idea there is to take those info boxes and to really standardize them, to apply a set of rules such and to link it to a database so that there is a centralized entry. So for instance, if someone dies, this information has to be updated in all the language editions, and in principle there is no need to do it 200 times if you can do it in a centralized way. And or if a capital changes its name or things like that. They happen all the time on Wikipedia actually, you might be surprised. Or a ship changes its name, all these things. So for that kind of stuff, it would be enough to have one central database and then pull the information from there when a Wikipedia article is rendered for the user. And this is currently being implemented as a opt-in option for the individual wikis, because some wikis resist that, they don't want, like Israeli and Arab, for instance, they will never agree on what Palestine is, what the population of Palestine is, this kind of stuff. And so they're a bit hesitant on adopting such a centralized measure of information. But each piece of information will have provenance attached to it. So it is like population of Palestine according to that source. But still, any wiki can decide whether they enable the feature, and then on each individual article, anyone working on that article can decide whether they will use that feature or not. But if they use it, then it's a whole lot of work being saved. Another aspect that they're tackling, is actually the one that they're tackling first, is the number of interlanguage links. If you go to basically any Wikipedia article, let's say this one here, on the left-hand side you have all those languages. So here Einstein has on the order of 150 or so. And if you go to any of those languages, like let's just take Afrikaans for fun, it's a long article already, but in the very last section you see then here all the interlanguage links that go to all the other language, and this is contained in each and every one of them. And there are loads of bots running around the different wikis, telling the Wikipedia in Vietnamese that now an article exists in Thai, for instance, or so. But the two communities normally don't interact much with each other. It's just that okay, the article now exists also in that language. Sometimes people will use this actively, like if there is an article about a subject that I want to write about, but it is not available in a language that I understand, then I'm happy to be notified that now it's available in a language that I understand, so that I can work with that as a source. But anyway, it's a large amount of redundant information, and so they're tackling this first, so that there is now a central database of which article is available in what languages, and it has just to be updated there, and the wikis, if they want, they can pull it from there in order to reduce bot traffic.
So for this specific article about English version is different from the African version. So you just do the translated language.
No, for such popular subjects like Einstein, there is enough resources in many languages, and so people will normally write this on the basis of the resources they have available in their language. Whereas for some obscure topics like a newly described butterfly, you basically have that one paper.
I don't understand why
So it's not a
the
translation.
person who trying to do article like for this like African or like some like Vietnamese just didn't translate English version.
No, it's not necessarily translation. It can be completely different.
I understand, but why just don't translate because it's already written.
Because they wanted to write it.
And not everybody is fluent in English. That's another criterion.
But
So-
that person doesn't know nothing.
He could write about Einstein.
No, but it's actually the case that many editors, also in large Wikipedias like German or French, they're monolingual. Especially on the English one, yeah. They're monolingual people, yeah. It doesn't really matter to them that there is another article available in another language. It's not useful to them. And so just imagine you were told to use a sword in Bengali. So I don't know how much you would like that. So that it's just a matter of fact. People go there for fun, and they, English is not always part of the fun for everybody. Okay, let's leave it at that. Then Wikidata we roughly talked about. Let's go to altmetrics. In principle, you probably have heard about the article level metrics that PLOS are now promoting, like how often has an article been accessed in its HTML, PDF, and XML versions, how often has it been tweeted about, things like that. And this is article level metrics as opposed to journal level metrics like the impact factor. On Wikipedia you can have a whole range of levels of metrics. So like publisher level metrics, I'll show the example of PLOS here. Here you have citation, the number of pages on here. You have the top 100 Wikipedias, and each column indicates the number of pages that cite at least one DOI that belongs to that publisher. Clause in that case. And you can do this for any DOI that is registered with Crossref here. And yeah, so that's one thing. You can do this for any publisher. You can do this for any language. Then there's file level metrics. That's something really, well, not much talked about. It goes back to the SVG issue that I mentioned before, that most, basically no figures and scholarly sources are published under under reusable or editable file format. For some reason this doesn't work. Let me just... I don't know what the problem is. It may well be the tool server. That is the server on which many of the tools for doing statistics are running, and it is at the moment currently crushing on an almost daily basis. Because there are so many people now doing statistics about everything. Okay, so just to follow up on the journal or publisher level statistics, you can have the top 100 publishers by citations in the English Wikipedia. It's Elsevier, Nature, blah blah, what you would expect, and PLOS come in on the order of 15 or so here. Whereas on the Vietnamese Wikipedia, PLOS is number 2 after Elsevier, before Nature and also.
What by journal?
We don't have this by journal yet because it's a bit more difficult.
DOIs are by publisher.
No, that's actually the DOI prefix. The DOI prefix is by publisher. You can do it by journal, but the problem is many publishers have not consistently applied a certain pattern on how to split their DOIs between journal and article level. And that's hard to sort out on a generic basis from the data that we have. Oh, here it loaded finally. It didn't load for the one that I wanted to show, but it doesn't matter that much. So here we have the page views for pages containing files from the category Open Access Publishing in the media repository. So images and movies, sound files from categorized as stemming from open access sources. They have been viewed altogether 12 million times in April this year. And the top one is actually the article Schizophrenia, which has this image here and so on. Then you can see, you can see on a file level what the reuse is. And you can see this for any of those languages. And it really goes down to very obscure. This is Nahuatl. I had never heard of that language before I had seen the statistics. So it's basically the language that the Aztecs use, and there is a Wikipedia in that language. And once you're used to this kind of metrics, you can also start asking questions like,